Welcome to this historical analysis. Today, we're unpacking a moment that literally reshaped modern history. We're going to explore how drawing a single line on a map, just one political boundary, completely upended the lives of millions overnight and forever altered the destiny of an entire subcontinent.
Okay, let's dive into this. Just imagine for a second. You go to sleep in the exact same house your family has lived in for centuries, but when you wake up, you're told you don't belong there anymore. You're suddenly a stranger in your own country. In 1947, as British rule in India was finally coming to an end, this unimaginable scenario became a terrifying reality for millions of people. It's a decision that brought independence, sure, but it also birthed one of history's most painful tragedies.
Section 1. The beginning of British rule.
To really grasp why this partition happened, we got to rewind about 400 years. Back in the early 1600s, India was an absolute powerhouse, one of the wealthiest nations on earth, famous for its spices, cloth, and silk. Naturally, this massive wealth acted like a magnet, pulling in the British East India Company. Now, they started out purely for trade, but they didn't stay merchants for long. As powerful local empires like the Mughals started fracturing, the British swooped in and exploited those divisions. They went from trading goods to ruling land, officially cementing their grip after winning the Battle of Plassey in 1757. And for the next century, it was brutal. Crushing taxes and the destruction of local industries built up to this boiling point, sparking the massive 1857 rebellion, where soldiers and everyday citizens finally took up arms to fight back.
Section 2. Freedom and Two Ideologies.
Now, even though the 1857 revolt didn't kick the British out, it planted a crucial, undeniable seed. It made people realize we absolutely have to be free. And that realization birthed organized movements, most notably the Indian National Congress. Fast forward to 1915, Mahatma Gandhi returns to India from South Africa and brings this absolute game-changer of a unifying strategy, satyagraha, or nonviolent resistance. His idea was to fight the British without raising a single weapon. And it worked. It created successive, massive waves of peaceful protest, bringing farmers, students, workers, and women together into one giant united front for freedom.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how things were shifting behind the scenes. While the whole country wanted independence, internal religious and political differences were rapidly growing in the 1930s and 40s. This brings us to the two-nation theory, championed by Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Jinnah actually started out as a strong supporter of Hindu-Muslim unity. But over time, his perspective shifted. He and the All India Muslim League began arguing that Hindus and Muslims weren't just practicing different religions, they were fundamentally distinct nations with completely different cultures and political identities.
So we end up with two vastly different visions. On one side, you have the Indian National Congress, led by figures like Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, fiercely advocating for a united India. They believed India had been a land of diverse religions and cultures for centuries, and they feared that dividing the country by religion would just be a recipe for endless future conflict. But on the flip side, the Muslim League had very real fears that in a united, Hindu-majority India, Muslims would be entirely marginalized politically. And because of that fear, in the 1940 Lahore Resolution, they formalized their demand for a completely separate Muslim nation, Pakistan.
Section 3. Direct action and hatred.
And this is where the pace of history takes a very dark turn. Finding a compromise between these two ideologies just became impossible. What started as high-level political debates in meeting halls rapidly descended into intense social tension and deep distrust on the ground. The terrifying turning point was Direct Action Day on August 16, 1946. Called by the Muslim League to demonstrate strength for the Pakistan demand, it spiraled horrifically out of control, primarily in Kolkata. In what became known as the Great Calcutta Killing, over 4,000 innocent people were murdered in just 4 days. Homes were torched, shops were looted, and the riots quickly spread to places like Noakhali, Bihar, and Punjab. Neighbors who had literally lived side by side peacefully for centuries were suddenly turning into enemies and filling the entire country with fear.
Section 4. Historic and painful partition.
Faced with this mounting, uncontrollable violence, the British government realized they were staring right down the barrel of an imminent civil war. Maintaining control was simply no longer possible. Enter Lord Louis Mountbatten, the last British viceroy, who was tasked with accelerating the British exit. Under the Mountbatten Plan, the British decided they would leave immediately, but to do so, they'd grant independence by dividing British India into two brand new countries, India and Pakistan. This birthed the almost impossible challenge of drawing a geographical border right through ancient, deeply intertwined communities.
So, the crucial point is this.
5 weeks. That is literally all the time given to Cyril Radcliffe, the British official tasked with drawing the borders of these two new nations. And shockingly, Radcliffe had never even been to India before. He was forced to rely purely on outdated maps and religious census data to carve up a subcontinent in just over a month.
The result was the Radcliffe Line. When this suddenly drawn border was finally announced, the shock was unimaginable. It arbitrarily split the culturally rich and deeply integrated regions of Punjab and Bengal. Countless people woke up to the horrifying realization that the ancestral homes they were sitting in were now suddenly situated in a foreign country.
Section 5. History's biggest migration. Mass panic immediately set in across the subcontinent. Hindu and Sikh families in newly formed Pakistan desperately fled toward India, while Muslim families in India fled toward Pakistan. Millions packed whatever they could carry and ran, walking on foot, riding in slow-moving bullock carts, and literally clinging to the roofs of dangerously overcrowded trains. This migration gave rise to one of the most horrifying details of this era: the ghost trains. As refugees packed into train cars to flee across the new borders, they were frequently ambushed. Trains would pull into stations filled entirely with the corpses of murdered passengers. Entire villages were burned to the ground. Children were separated from their parents forever. The survivors were left with traumatic images that would scar them for a lifetime, forced to leave behind not just their belongings, but their memories and their heritage.
1.4 crore. 14 million people. Let the sheer gravity of that number sink in for a second. That is the staggering number of individuals who were suddenly displaced, forced to completely abandon their roots. It remains, to this day, one of the largest and most painful mass migrations in the entirety of human history.
And amidst the utter chaos, the hatred, and the desperate journeys across those newly minted borders, an estimated 10 lakh, or 1 million people, lost their lives. The human cost of this single, rushed political decision was simply devastating.
And this brilliantly illustrates the heartbreaking paradox of August 15, 1947. On one hand, you have the incredible joy of two independent nations being born. After 200 years of colonial rule, people celebrated in the streets. Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru delivered his famous speech about awaking to life and freedom, while Pakistan also began its journey under Muhammad Ali Jinnah. But simultaneously, happening at that exact same time, there was unimaginable grief, violence, and homelessness echoing all across the borders.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. If a political line can divide land, how long does it take for humanity to bridge the divide? Even today, the roots of countless families in both India and Pakistan remain deeply tied across that border, tracing back to homes that used to sit on the same shared land. A political line can divide a map, but the history we've analyzed today teaches us a deep lesson. Hatred and division really only leave behind pain. If we learn from this, we realize that humanity remains our greatest and most important shared identity. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this deep dive has helped you understand the profound